don't know why it takes so long. Oh. Hi, good evening. Welcome to Community Homeworks class this evening on gutters and downspouts. Lee will show us how to maintain them, clean them, and make sure that they are doing their job at your home tonight. We'd like to remind you that we are a nonprofit organization and do rely on donations. If you would like to send us a donation for the end of year giving, the information on how to do that will scroll across the bottom of the screen. Also going across the bottom of your screen will be a way for you to send us questions. We can answer those live tonight, or if you think of a question when you're watching this later, just shoot us an email or a text and we will try to get an answer for you. After tonight's presentation, we're going to have a second presentation. You will have to close the class and then open up on Facebook or YouTube the next presentation, which will be part 1 of gingerbread house making. We are going to have a gingerbread house making contest. So stick around after our class tonight. Immediately following the broadcast, we'll have a special holiday workshop to launch our new Homes for the Holidays gingerbread house contest. Part 1 will be this evening, and it is recorded, so you can go back and watch it at any time. It will be on constructing your gingerbread house. And part 2, which will be how to decorate your house, will be shown on Thursday at 6 o'clock, also on our Facebook or YouTube page. After that, you'll learn how you can submit your house to enter our contest. We hope everyone will watch and try to make a gingerbread house and have some fun. Again, tonight's class is on gutters and downspouts. We'd like to welcome Lee Taylor, who will be here to show us how to take care of those things.
All right. And again, thanks for watching. Like Jean said, if you have a question, put it in the comments. I'm going to try to remember to actually say what the question is. I forgot last time.
Well, they usually hear me read it.
Yeah, I still say it. So yeah, what we're going to be talking about tonight is how to maintain your gutters and downspouts and keep them operational for a good long time. We're going to be talking about just basically understanding the purpose of the gutters, what they do, and how they impact your house and your basement. We're going to talk about what are some of the negative effects of neglecting them or not cleaning them out, and how that can compound issues to your home. We'll talk about how to safely clean them out, how to safely be able to go through and just make sure that they're working properly. And we'll talk about ice damming also with this time of year. We're not going to get into the repairs. That is another class. So we actually have a gutter and downspout repair class. And so if you have questions along those lines,
They can still ask.
They can still ask, but yeah, if we start drifting off too much. So, and some of the general maintenance is kind of on the repair side. Like you said, related classes are the basements and crawl spaces, roofing repair, landscaping, fall, winter maintenance, spring, summer maintenance, and a few others, I'm sure. So we'll start out with why are gutters on a home. So basically, gutters are put on a home for one reason, and that reason is to divert water away from the foundation of your home. Generally, you're going to want water. You don't want water standing or even running back towards your house for the first, from your foundation out at least about 3 to 4 feet. If you have standing water in that area and you have a crawl space or a basement or something along that line, there's a good chance you're going to be, that water is going to be diverted back down into your basement or crawl space. A little bit different situation with poured walls versus concrete versus like a block wall. The issue with block walls, and that's what most of the houses, older houses are, is that water actually fills those blocks up, and then you end up with water seeping in your basement right at the base of where that concrete block meets that floor. So like I said, gutters are meant to be able to do that. I'm going to go through quick anatomy of what these gutters are. So this is, again, our little roof setup here. So we got your roof shingles. Then you got, I'll pop this, come on this side. You can see this a little better. I can take this end off. You got your drip edge. Then you got your gutter itself, should be tucked up behind that drip edge. This is the gutter itself. And then you have hanging mechanisms of how this gutter is actually attached to the subfascia on your overhang. So you have a couple of different attachment methods. And I'm just going to touch on a couple of them. You have the good old-fashioned nail. You can see this nail is actually sticking out a little bit. You're gonna, with these types, you're gonna have a spacer. What that spacer is the nail or screw will run through that spacer and make it so that my gutter downspout doesn't fall off. Basically, it makes it so that that gutter doesn't crush in on itself. So that's what that spacer does. And sometimes when these nails get loose, these spacers may drop inside. So if I say, something along the lines of, check your spacer or to see if you have them, that's what I'm talking about. So you have the nail-on style. You can also use screws, and we'll get into that a little bit more. This is just long gutter screws that you can get, and we'll get into those in a little bit more. This is actually what the nail looks like. They're a good long spike. The other style you have is this style. You may want to come around front to be able to see this. This is similar to this right here. So it hooks onto the back of the gutter piece. And then this part runs a screw into your subfascia. And that's what holds the gutter on.
Does that piece have a name?
This?
Mm-hmm.
Gutter hanger. It's one of those things. They're called a lot of different things, but most people just call them a gutter hanger. So, like I said, a bunch of different ways. And then there are other styles. You may have one that is similar to this. Like I said, I'm just touching on a few of them here. I'd have to even look at this closer. All right, that's what I'm going to do. So this style, I can do it here. So this would clip in like this, and this part would fit over the back, right? And then this style, you push this in like this, and this spins. Sure it does. And this actually is bent down. And this tucks. This is not set up quite right. But that tucks underneath that first shingle and is actually nailed down. You don't see these too often, but again, depending on where you're from or, who put the gutters in, it's kind of up to that person to be able to figure out how they want to hang that gutter. So like I said, a couple of different ways to be able to hang those, gutters. Pull this guy out for now. And I'm sure there are other ones out there that I have not talked about, but there are always some means to be able to attach that gutter. I talked about this in the other class. When I talk about subfascia, that's what this is, and this is usually has it's either painted or it has like an aluminum fascia or something like that, and then your soffit's underneath here. So some, like I said, some is just painted, some is actually white aluminum that is tucked all up underneath and has a lip that comes out and helps hold your soffit on. That's what's underneath here, and then your house would be back here. When we talk about overhang, we're talking about how far it overhangs the house. So let's say this part here would be the house. This would be about a 2-foot overhang. So if I say overhang, that's what I'm talking about. And not all houses have it. Some do, some don't. So as far as general maintenance on the gutters themselves, what you want to do is obviously clean them out. Why? Well, what's going to happen if you don't clean them out? A, they're just not going to do their job. They are going to be clogged up. If they get clogged up with leaves and debris and other things, they just add a lot of weight, and eventually these hangers or these attachment points can fall off. And I've seen it where a gutter gets so full of gook that it just rips off the side of the house, and as it's coming down, it's taking out siding with it, or it's taking out a window with it, or it's hitting the car or whatever. So I said gutters that aren't cleaned out can get filled up with all that stuff and ice and everything else, especially in the winter. And if those attachments weren't necessarily great to begin with, yeah, they can come off and release. At worst, at best, they're just not going to do their job. And the idea of a gutter is to be able to catch all that water into that gutter. The gutter is sloped to what's called a downspout. And that's what this is right here. You can take a peek here. I actually put a little leaf diverter in this. But this is all the water goes into here. And then it's hooked up to a downspout. Now, I don't have the correct style downspout, but this would normally have an elbow and bend back towards the house. So it'd come down like this, back, and then bend down and run down your house, and then out. And again, the idea is, he said at the bottom, you may have something just like this. A lot of times what happens is you have what's called an extension on that. So this is what's coming off that house and off that gutter, and that extension should run out, like I said, a couple feet. Now, the problem is that those extensions, they get popped off. People mow, they get stepped on, whatever. And a lot of times you end up just dumping this water actually closer to your house than where that gutter is over, or that overhang is overhanging. So that's part of it. If you don't have extensions, you can buy this stuff at most of the home centers. You do want to look at a couple things. If you have aluminum or steel, you want to get that same style, I guess. And this does come in two different sizes. I gotta get up though. So this is a comparison. So like I said, you can get, there are large downspouts and all this. And this is more of a standard size. And this boils down to how much roof area you have, how much water is actually going to be running through that. And it also boils down to what this size is, because this doesn't work as far as connecting up to your downspout connection. So realize there are two different sizes. Colors, that's up to you. Most of the time standard is white, but there are a lot of gutters out there that are different colors. You can get those. So the other is they have vinyl out there. Some gutters are vinyl. And, if you have vinyl gutters, I have issues with them, but you want to make sure that you get the vinyl attachment pieces for them. So like I said, if you're having to take these in to find them, the best thing you can do is be able to take a section of your downspout or an extension or something along that line, so you can match them up right in the store. It just saves time and effort and everything else. So water's going down here into this part here where the water is collected into your downspout. The downspout generally bends back towards your house and then runs down the side of your house, and then another elbow with an extension on it. So there's a couple of ways you can deal with those extensions. Some people don't want a long pipe, running out into the yard. I can't blame them necessarily. So there are a variety of things that you can do. You can do the good old block like this, where it just sits. Let's imagine that downspout's going down here, and you have I'm using the big one just because it's the right way. And you can have it like this, and this block is actually pitched a little bit. You can, set your grade a little bit or set a block underneath it, just something that's going to wash that water away from the house. Those work fine, as long as what's going on out here, your grade, is not pitched in a way where that water is going to run out and then run back right towards your house. So grading on a house is something I'm going to talk about in a minute, but basically grading, what it means is that if you were to put water anywhere near your house, it's just going to run away. So that grade should always be pitched so that it's higher at your house, base of your house, and it fans down out into the yard. So you can do a little splash guard like this, as long as it's pitched a little bit. You can do things like a little tube. I've seen people where they, get a smaller version of this, and there's a connector that connects right to the downspout, and they put that on, and they run this, extend it out, and run it to wherever. You can do something like that. There are other versions, something like this, where again there's a connector and stuff. A lot of people use this like in flower beds. They can cover up with mulch or whatever, and then connect this to wherever.
It's actually connected on the table.
This? Oh yeah, there's a connector. Part of a connector. So yeah, these are designed to fit into that downspout and then connect up to that. So like I said, there's a couple of different ways to be able to do that. Some people will go along and do what's called an underground. That's generally about a 4-inch tube. That's a solid tube, doesn't have slits in it, and they'll run it underground, however far out, to what's called a pop-up drain, and that requires digging a trench and making sure that it's sloped, and then putting a pop-up drain further out in the yard to be able to get that water away. And sometimes those are nice if you're in a situation where you have to go like under a sidewalk, or you're really tight quarters where you have to really control that water as far as where it goes. Sometimes that's the best way. If you do an underground style system, like I said, it's just a plastic 4-inch pipe. Generally what I say with that is that wherever that your downspout comes along, you want to put a section on there, and they'll be in the stores. Most of the time they're plastic, but it connects to your downspout, and then there's a grate. Lets all the water through, but leaves and anything else that are in that downspout hit that and then shoot out. And then it connects here and then to your underground. That way you're able to open that up and be able to stuff a hose in it to be able to make sure that it's clear of stuff. And it also helps with things getting in there. So like I said, a lot of different ways to be able to deal with getting that water away from the house. But like I said, that's the whole point. So as far as the cleaning the gutters and maintaining them and that sort of thing, there's no real right time to do it. Ideally, you're doing it in the fall when, just a little bit after those leaves have fallen. It makes no sense to necessarily do it beforehand. But you want to make sure that, after you clean the gutters out, there's not going to be necessarily more leaves coming down. So like I said, I'll get up there and be able to clean that out. So what I do when I'm cleaning my gutters out is I will go through first, and I'm going to look at the hangers, however those hangers are. All right. So I'm going to look inside, and I'll do this off a ladder or off the roof. I'm going to look inside, and I'm going to look and say, all right, I have some nails sticking out, like that head sticking out. I know that should be pounded in some more. But before I go pounding that in, I make sure I have my spacer in. Sometimes I've had it, my gutters are old, where these nails completely come out and the spacers fall in there. So I go through, check those out. If I can nail it back in, great. Just a hammer, simple nail it in. If it doesn't feel like that nail is actually biting into anything, you can move it a little bit. It requires drilling a new hole and that sort of stuff. And we'll talk about that a little more in the gutter maintenance. But more often than not, it just means that where that nail has gone into that subfascia it can't hold anymore. So this is where you can go out. Again, we're not necessarily promoting this brand, but this is what it was at the store. They have, gutter screws. These are white ended. Usually they'll sell them. These are 7-inch white with a square drive on it. And what you do is you remove that nail get a pair of pliers or a hammer. You have to put something so you're not crushing your gutter. Get that nail out, and then you're going to want to use like a screw gun or something along that line to be able to put that spacer back in, and then that screw runs in. I'm just doing this for purposes so you can see, and then you drive that screw in just like you would a nail, and it's actually going to run a little bit deeper into that subfascia and hold a little bit better. Again, don't forget that spacer, because if you do, you'll crush that gutter. You'll end up, I can't even crush it down. You'll end up crushing it like this, you know, and then it's not really doing its job. So, like I said, you have gutter screws if you need them. And then whatever attachment you have. If you have ones like this, if you have a screw gun, and you can put a nut driver on that and go through and make sure to tighten those up. I would imagine, if you look at these screws, I would imagine that, let's say you have a system like that, and you go to run that screw in, and all it does is spin. It doesn't feel like it's biting. I'd imagine you could go to the hardware store, get the old screw, and just get the same style, shape, but just make it a little bit longer and be able to run that in to replace that. Because again, sometimes it's that subfascia where it's just rotted out in that area where it's just not going to hold. The strap style that I was showing that actually go underneath the shingle, you'll want to be careful with those. The reason is that, like I said, it tucks it, like I showed you before, it tucks underneath that shingle. If you have style, I'm going to say this, if you have a style like that and you notice that it's not holding anymore, unless you are very comfortable with your shingles and your roofing and stuff along that line, I wouldn't be getting in there and trying to lift that shingle up, because again, depending if it's cold outside or if the shingle's old, it's going to be brittle. You can end up causing more damage to your roof by trying to lift that up and fix this than it's worth, if that makes sense. So like I said, if you have that style and you have issues with this, you may want to call somebody out that can deal with that. And there are gutter companies and stuff out there. And that's part of the reason I don't like these, personally. I like the ones that you have access to and you're not having to necessarily mess with your shingles. So I make sure all my attachments are good. If they're good, great. Then I'm going to get in there and clean it out. So like I said, what are the easiest ways to clean it out? Well, it depends. If you have a 2-story house, this is where it can get really hairy. You, at that point, would have to use an extension ladder, and that can be nerve-wracking occasionally. But if you're comfortable with that, you'd set your ladder. So there's a couple of ways you deal with this. Generally, you don't really want to lean that ladder up against the gutter. Why? Well, it is nothing more than aluminum or a light steel. And depending on the weight of the person leaning on it, you can actually crush that gutter even with these attachments on there. So how do you deal with that? Well, you don't break your gutter like that. You have what are called standoff. So this is basically an aluminum bar that has rubber ends, and you attach it to an extension ladder, and it's about that wide. And you attach it in a place where it can actually rest, depending on your overhang. Some people will have it rest up against their house, and it pushes them off far enough where they can work on their gutter and their ladder is stable. Some people will have to put that standoff where it's resting on the roof. And again, those rubber feet are protecting those shingles, and it stabilizes that ladder and makes it so that you're not crushing your gutters necessarily when you're going to clean them out. If you have a step ladder like this, and you can reach it, again, this is just a little 6-foot step ladder. These things go all the way up to like 12 foot plus. So the main thing with these extension ladders, or these step ladders, I'm sorry, is open them up, make sure these are all opened up. Generally, I'm going to tell people to work in front of them. You can work off to the side, left or right. It just depends. You want to make sure all 4 feet are firmly on the ground. You don't want it, off to one side or anything like that. I walk up the ladder. I pull back on it a little bit. That stabilizes these fronts, those front legs. We're doing this. And when I'm working off this ladder, this is not a step and this is not a step. So, this way I can get in here and be able to work on it, clean it. Now my reach, depending on how long your arms are, is about there. What I don't want to see people doing is this. If your belly button goes outside of this triangle, you're asking to fall over. So generally I tell people stay inside this and be able to reach and then have to jump down and move their ladder. That is the correct way to do it. If you have somebody helping and they want to hold your ladder, the best way they can hold it is to be able to be on this side. You're actually helping hold that ladder that way. I've seen people where they're trying to hold the ladder like this. If somebody starts to tip, that person that's holding that ladder is never going to stop them versus somebody on the side. So you always want to make sure that is good. Extension ladders. You want to make sure that the ratio is correct. I'm using this as an example. This is not what you do with these step ladders, but I'm using this as an example. So what you do is you have your feet bedded into the dirt or whatever. They have little flip ups that have prongs that actually dig into the dirt. They also have a pad. So the pad is for a hard surface like concrete, asphalt. The part that flips up and has the tongs in it dig into the dirt for soft surfaces. So you set it, you lean it up against with your standoff or whatever it is. And then as far as the angle, how do you figure out that angle? What I do is I'll get it where I think it's about right. I have my feet touching it down here. I'm going to reach out like this. And if you're doing this, it's too steep. If I'm doing this and I can't reach that very well, it's too much of a lean. So generally, if you have your feet up against it and you can hold it like this and you're not stretching and you're not doing this, it's about right. And that'll make it so that most likely that ladder is not going to kick off. And again, what's extending beyond that roof should be at least a couple of feet beyond with an extension ladder. You don't want that extension ladder to be right on that edge, because I've seen it where that bottom kicks out and it's one of these sort of deals where if it's real close and that bottom kicks out, you only have about that much to go before you're falling face first. So
into
a
your
couple
house.
feet past, yeah. And I've seen even firefighters do that where they had it and they're running up the ladder and then it kicks out.
This is a tip I learned on Pinterest.
Oh boy.
You have to move your ladder, please. If you have like a one-story house,
Yep.
or even if you can stand just on the bottom step, you take an old paint roller, or the cover doesn't need to be brand new like this one, and you can sit it in there and you can roll along and it will push the junk.
There you go. So there's a lot of ways to be able to do that. You said there's always somebody come up with cool ways to be able to do it.
This is how I do over my front door, because I can stand because I have steps. So how do I put my ladder up?
Right.
So I can stand. And this is just a broom handle, and you can roll along.
Yep.
And push it all out.
And that's the cool thing about today's day and age. There's 1,000 videos out there of people with different ideas and all this sort of stuff. You can use good old scoops. You're not
using your hands.
Using your hands that are gross. You can also use something along this line. And again, this is kind of set up for a ranch style house, not a 2-story house necessarily. And this was, it's always grouchy. Somebody's alarm is going on. Is that you? Ugh. There it goes. So this extends out, hooks up to your garden hose. Got a little controller. You can angle it. And you can angle this. And it's going to shoot out it's going to shoot out water. So you can angle it this way, it'll shoot out. And you're able to hook in and spray it along to where your downspout is. So like I said, something like this is kind of nice. And some people leave leaf blowers. It just depends on what it is. But the idea is that you're getting the debris out of there, leaves, the whirligigs, the seed pods. You also want to get the grit and stuff. So a lot of times you're gonna have grit. So this is shingle grit. You're always gonna have some. That's normal. But your gutters will talk to you if you listen. Your gutters will say, hey, your shingles are getting a little old. And how do you know that? Well, if the bottom of let's say you cleaned your gutters out last year, right? And you're back at it again, you're gonna clean your gutters out. Let's say you have like a big wad of that shingle grit in the bottom of your gutters. That's saying your shingles may be getting to the point where they may need to be replaced. So again, these are little cues sometimes that can make you kind of go, oh, maybe I should have somebody come out and check my shingles because there's an awful lot of shingle grit in my gutter. So he said multiple ways to be able to clean that out. But again, you're moving that gut to your downspout. You also want to think about your downspout as far as cleaning those out. If your gutters are clean and your downspouts are clogged, well, it's kind of only half done. So at that point, he said sometimes I'm going to stuff a hose down there, and a lot of times, at those bends, I'm going to use a big one just because it's at those bends, right in here, or where it's going down your house here, where a lot of times twigs and whatever else are going to jam up in there and stop that water from being able to flow. So obviously the easiest way, I stuff a hose in, I turn it on full blast, and I look at where it's popping out. If nothing's coming out, well, then I go along with a stick or a broom handle or something along that line. You just tap on the side of the downspout. Well, what is that doing? I said your downspouts will talk to you too. If they sound hollow, well, they're clear. But most of the time, they're clogged up. And when you tap on them, you'll hear that tone difference. It just sounds like a clogged up pipe. So sometimes it requires stuffing a hose in there a little bit further. Sometimes it requires giving a little bit of a tap and letting that gook plop out and stuff. But you want to make sure that those downspouts are clear. This is back to, boy, that's really loud. This is back to as far as how your downspout or how that water is going away from your house. And if you have, let's say, that underground pop-up style, this is where you're going to want to do something that to make it so all that gook is not jamming into that hose that's running underground or that pipe that's running underground. So like back to that connection point that I was talking about, people will sometimes take that off, put a temporary cap on, get their downspouts cleaned out, and then what they can do at that point, if you do a pop-up style, is I'll stuff a hose in there and just figure out where that pop-up is. And a lot of times it has a cap on it that you can pull off, and it's a little 90 underneath. And you can flush that out. Any debris will walk down or flow down to that point, and you can clean it out at that point and then be able to reinsert that cap. So, like I said, clean the gutters, that sort of thing. And then clean your downspouts is good. Another thing I like to check, and this is something that you can pay attention to, is if, let's say you have a good rain. If you have water dripping from back here, if you notice water dripping back here, it could usually one of two things. It either A, means that this gutter, that these hangers are not necessarily incorrectly, and this gutter is not sitting flat. It's actually sitting more of an angle. So I've seen that where the water fills up the gutter and then runs along like this and hits this point and drips down. So that's one reason. The other reason is back to what this is called drip edge, is that That water runs off. You have a little bit of an overhang on your shingle. Sometimes that water will grab a little bit. And sometimes that water will cling to the drip edge. And it's supposed to drip into the gutter. But if your gutter, this part, is tucked up in front of that, then that can happen occasionally. Expansion, contraction, cold weather, that sort of thing. Maybe the gutter wasn't tucked up necessarily to begin with. That water will run behind that gutter. Now, why is that an issue? Back to your subfascia, depending on how that subfascia is protected. So that's why I said sometimes that subfascia has an aluminum wrap that comes and tucks up underneath your drip edge and runs along the face of that subfascia and then down and holds your soffit that's underneath. And then at that point, you know, is that water really going to get through? It could, but most likely it's not. But it leaves staining and all that sort of stuff. And yes, water can still get into where those nails are protruding in and stuff. If it's just a painted subfascia, a lot of times the subfascia is not necessarily dimensional lumber like this, like a 1.5 inches wide. It may be only 1 inch or so thick, depending on the house. I've seen it where water running back in behind rots that subfascia out, and then you got a whole other set of problems. You know, keeping the gutters clear and, you know, all that sort of stuff is part of it. But yes, you want that gutter to be tucked up underneath. Now, if you have the issue of, you know, you're looking at your gutter and everything's connected good, your hangers are secure, your downspouts are clear and everything else. But let's say you have an issue where that it just doesn't want to tuck up behind there and you can't really get in there and deal with it. Well, what you can do is you can get, you can buy coil aluminum. This is what I did at home. I cheated. So I just bought some coil aluminum and I figured how much I'd have to cut, and I'd cut little strips that are about, that wide or so. And what I did is I tucked that up behind my drip edge and just created an extension of it. And it kind of hung down into the gutter, and where the hangers were, I just cut a little V out of it so it would fit over that hanger. And it solved the problem for the most part. It doesn't even really need to be attached. It just kind of sits in there, and they just kind of rest like this, and it extends down about to here. And yeah, we were having that issue with water running in, and for the most part we don't know. So that's something else you want to look at when you're looking at your gutters and cleaning them out and stuff. As far as getting it to the point of not necessarily having to clean them out as much, and that's the key word there, as much, is you want to think about how to prevent things from getting in. So I'm going to start with where your downspout connects back to this thing that fell off before. So this is connected, you know, usually at the low end of the gutter. That's the other thing you want to make sure is that your gutter is actually running. Water is running towards your downspout. So you can dump water in there and it should move. It's not going to move super fast, but it should be moving towards that downspout. So you go to where that downspout is. I'm just going to click it up there. Simple really for now. Don't fall apart on me. It's going to fall apart on me instantly. Do that. So we'll do it this way. So you're looking down into the gutter. So there's a couple things you can do. There's things like this that fit in your downspout, right? Is connected down here like this, right? So what this does is it stops those twigs and whatnot from getting into your downspouts and clogging them up. Does it cause everything to kind of jam up around this? Yes. But that can be sometimes the hardest part of cleaning gutters out as far as getting those downspouts clean. So something in there, this is a metal piece made out of aluminum. They have other things that are like this, where that water is going to flow through that screen and be able to get down in. It just sits in your gutter like that. So like I said, a lot of different ways to be able to stop that twigs and whatnot from getting into your downspout. So like I said, you want to think about that. The other thing you want to look at is sometimes people will put they call them gutter guards, gutter shields, gutter helmets. There's a lot of different names for them. There's a lot of different products out there. I'm going to start out with the cheapest one first. And I'll tell you why I don't like it. So they have styles like this. You buy it in a roll. And you cut out what you need. My knife is full of dirt. All right. I'm just doing this as a quick example. So you get what you need. And the idea is that it sits in your gutter like this. So it kind of sits in between. And some people, you can niche around. You can take a niche out of it so it sits around over your hangers, however those hangers are. And the idea is that it sits like that. All right. And you have to realize this would be niched out and kind of hanging down a little further. Same with this front, would be niched out to get around that hanger. So that's great. The reason I don't like them is you get that first twig that falls on it and it crushes down, it falls off. Wind catches it, flies out, that sort of stuff. They're not very durable. Now, are they easy to take out to be able to clean your gutter? Yeah. But ones like that don't necessarily work all that great. It's better than nothing. But I'd say that's the low end of a gutter guard system. Another style would be something like this. And a lot of times they may have a hinge or something connected to this. So what this style does, this is back to it tucks underneath your shingles a little bit. So again, you're having to lift those shingles up a little bit. And this particular style kind of clips in underneath. Now the pain is this, see that little lip right there? It's supposed to kind of hook underneath. Again, they're all a little bit different. They have little varieties on them and stuff. But you end up having to take a little cut out of that aluminum so it can actually fit underneath, because it just sits on top like this. It's not really going to do much. So if you're going to do a system like this, get the style that has a little bit of a curve to it, a little bit of a bend. A lot of times they have hinges on them, and those hinges connect to this part. Sometimes you have to squish it down with a pair of pliers to be able to connect that, and then you connect the next one, right? And the nice thing about that is that when you put the next one on, they come in 3-foot or 4-foot sections. Don't overlap them. Or if you do overlap them, understand how you overlap them. I like to leave them just a little bit separate by about that much. That way, all I need to do is when I clean my gutters out, they're hinged on there, and I can hinge it back like this and be able to get in there and clean that out. Now, does that work if you have a ladder leaning up against your gutter? No, not so much. So, like I said, a couple of varieties of the metal style, a little more durable. Is it going to deal with a limb hitting it and stuff? Depending on how big the limb is. I've seen it where these can get bent pretty easily and stuff. So, like I said, another style. Another style. That is this. And again, vinyl. Kind of the same deal, You don't really want it laying on top because, again, I've seen wind grab it. So ideally, it's supposed to be tucked underneath. And again, read the instructions. It'll say what it wants or how it's supposed to be installed. But, yeah, a lot of times that tucks underneath. And then this one, yeah, you see it has a little lip right here. It looks like that lip clips in, something along like that. These can be a little bit of a pain. There it goes. These can be a little bit of a pain to install. But, again, a little bit better. But you have to make sure they're fully engaged. A little more durable. Now, the issue is that with something like this, is that because, boy, it's in there now. Because it's vinyl, the UV rays and whatnot are going to turn this brittle after a little while. And so that's something you may need to deal with. It's got a mesh on the back so it doesn't let the shingle grit and stuff through it. So there's that style. style I like best are these little triangle piece like this. And they come in like 4-foot sections, and they're sold at the home stores. And they're really super easy to put in. You cut out what sections you want. They can go in between your pieces. You get this little triangular piece. It tucks into that lip. The back just rests up against that, and you can see how that's resting. It has a spot right here where the water is going to be able to run through. You don't see it from the ground. It stays in. I've had these in my gutters for 4 or 5 years now. Yeah, you'll get things that'll get stuck in there, whirligigs or leaves or whatever. They'll blow off. Me personally, I like these best. There is usually a top side, and you can see, I don't know if you can tell the color difference necessarily. Sometimes it's a slight color difference. Sometimes it's a texture difference. You can actually feel it. And that's actually what's meant to be up. A little bit of UV protection on it so it doesn't necessarily break down. These foam ones are really nice. Easy to put in, stay in. The best part about them is that just because you have some kind of a guard system in there, it doesn't mean that you never have to clean your gutters again. You know, something like this, you can do, you're not gonna be able to do this gutter, but you can do an inspection. So what you want to do is if you have something like this and you have some kind of a gutter guard system that's this style or the styles that we were talking about, still look in there. You're looking to see is what I'm using to protect my gutter is still intact. Is it actually doing what it needs to? With these, sometimes what'll happen is they just get gummed up with, you know, schmutz, and you have to pull them out and spray them off occasionally, be able to put them back in so that water can get in there. So just because you have these in doesn't mean you never have to clean your gutters out, especially when you're talking about where that gutter connection is. If you have some kind of a means for that water or for those debris to be able to not get into your downspouts, stuff will really collect around these no matter what you do with that.
Yeah, but we have a question. What about the companies that advertise you'll never have to clean your gutters again?
All right. So the question was, there are companies out there where they say you never have to clean your gutters again. And those are a different style of gutter. I think they're particular, I've heard called gutter helmets and stuff like that. But what that is it's actually a piece of metal and water will cling to it. It'll run up like this and then run back and drip in. And you end up with a little gap here. So this thing actually runs up like this, curves around, and that water drips in there. Those are really nice. Does it mean you never have to clean your gutters out again? I don't play in absolutes. I mean, I would still check on them, you know, and that's part of that. If you have something like that, generally you're still able to look in there. What gets me with those is I don't know if that shingle grit, and it'd be nice if somebody would comment on this. If they have a pair or if they have a system like that, I don't know if that shingle grit stays with that water and drips back into the gutter itself. And again, if you have an excessive amount of shingle grit building up on the bottom, that's going to inhibit that water flow. The other thing about those style gutter guards are generally they're made out of metal and they're relatively expensive to have installed. Most of the time, a lot of companies are going to say something along the lines of, you know, if you install them as your own, you know, like you buy them and then you install them, I guess you could do that, but they may not have a warranty. So this is something you would want to ask those questions. But yes, those are out there. I would ask those questions along, you know, the shingle grit and all that sort of stuff and get in. The other question I'd ask with something like that is, do you have to change the fasteners for your gutter system? And how those are actually attached. Again, back to, because it's aluminum, if you get a limb or something that falls on it, dents it, something along that line, and you have one of those systems, you may not necessarily be able to, as a homeowner, try to repair it and still hold your warranty. So ask those questions if you're going to do something like that. And you'll spend a decent amount on them. But like I said, they have been around a long time. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
So, as far as grade, I'm going to get into grade real quick. We have about 10 minutes left. So we talked about the gutters and water and everything else. Oh, I lied. I'm not going to talk about grade right now. Gutters in the winter. So sometimes, like I said, what will happen is that even with the gutters cleaned out and everything else, sometimes these get filled up with ice. You know, it's cold, everything freezes and stuff. And this is where we're really relying on these hangers to be able to hold that extra weight, because that's quite a bit of weight. What some people will do is they have what's called ice damming. I can show you a picture of what ice damming is. And I talked about this in another class. So this is your overhang right here. This is your wall. And basically what happens is snow on your roof. The heat loss from your house melts that snow, that turns into water. It starts running out until it hits a cold area. The cold area is right in this range here, where you don't have any heat from the house necessarily keeping it warm. It gets into this overhang area and freezes and creates a dam. And then water slowly builds that dam up higher and higher, and water can't get anywhere. What happens is that water will push underneath the shingles and work its way back, and then drip. It'll work its way back, actually back here into your house, right? And then drip into your house. So if you have issues like that, usually saying a couple other things, and the ice damming is related to multiple things. But what some people will do is they'll put what's called heat tape. So this is a cord that's plugged in, and this cord runs up depending on your overhang. It may run up in a V like this, just a little pass where your house meets your overhang, and then come back down. And all that's doing is keeping a channel open for water to be able to, instead of creating that ice dam, it keeps the channel open for that water to be able to run down into your gutter. Okay. If you have something like that, really read the instructions. There's nothing wrong with them necessarily, but they do require a few things, like you don't want two wires touching. They say that can burn your house down. That's always a bad thing. They say it's not supposed to run off an extension cord, so you may have to have an electrician come out ideally and have it hooked up to a power in your soffit area with the thermostat on it, so that it's running when it's cold enough to be able to run. A lot of times too is that they'll lay that cord in the gutter itself, and they'll run it down the downspout to keep that downspout open, because you could have all that going on, it's fine, but it's not really doing anything for your gutter. So you lay them in and run it through that downspout and have it pop out the end, and that makes it so that any water that's getting in there is going to be able to get out. So heat tape, and the heat tape is not meant to melt the snow. So that's something that a lot of times people will do, is that they'll start getting ice dams and they'll go out and they'll buy this heat tape and lay it on top of the snow and think snow and ice and think that it's going to melt through. It doesn't. Not what it's designed to do. So if you have that, fine. You plug that thing in. A lot of times it has a little light on the end saying, yep, I'm working. Does it feel warm? Not necessarily. So sometimes you have to rely on that. You want to turn that thing on before it starts getting really cold or you get a lot of snow and stuff. Because again, it's meant just to keep that channel open, not to necessarily melt through that ice.
And if you've come to roofing class, Tim talks about filling nylon stockings and throwing.
Right, and laying them across that ice dam. Yep, filled with salt. There's a lot of things you can do. They said all this stuff's related. It all interacts with each other. So I want to talk about grade real quick. So grade, basically, like I said, is soil. I'm going to pick on this. Blah. Let's say this is the side of your house, right? Now you got your basement, however much is showing. So generally, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say that this bottom right here is where your siding starts. and you have that much to the floor of basement showing. Generally, it's only about that much, but we're gonna play with this. So what you want to do is that grade, again, you want that grade to be compacted soil that's running at a gentle slope. It may run out to about, 4 or 5 feet. Again, it sort of boils down to what you have as far as an overhang. If you don't have much of an overhang at all, that grade doesn't have to push out as far. If you have a long, like a 2-foot overhang, yeah, that grade may have to push out a little bit further. And again, it's a gentle slope. It's not something like this. It's just a nice gentle slope. The way to kind of test that, and I talk about this in spring, summer maintenance, is to go out during a rainstorm. You can look up and see how much of an overhang you have. Generally, if you have that water sitting definitely in that overhang area, so if you have a 2-foot overhang, if you have water sitting 2 foot or closer to your house pooling and just sitting there, that's an indication that grade is settled down and that water is just sitting up next to your house. And again, if it's a cinder block wall, it's going to get into that block or even through that concrete and work its way down and into your house. So generally, during a rainstorm or something along that line, yeah, you don't want that water sitting. I say a good 4 feet within your house. If it is, well, you can adjust that grade. A lot of times it's top dirt or whatever. It depends on what's going on down here. Some people like to put plants and anything else. You can do stone beds. You can do a lot of different things. But bringing that grade up is important. And usually basements with water issues and stuff like that boil down to a couple things. One of them is grade, that water running back. The other one is improper, I guess, gutters and stuff. Because I've seen it again where that gutter is dumping the water out and that water runs out of the gutter to the downspout and then runs right back towards the house. At that point, you're kind of defeating the purpose. So setting that grade is important. If you have a hard time kind of seeing, is that water, moving towards the house or something, you can get a 5-gallon bucket of water and gently dump it in. And again, it should run away from the house. If it sits there and pools, well, bring that grade up. If you're bringing a grade up, trick is what you want to do is you want to, let's say you're adding top dirt. Okay. You add some top dirt. You have to compact that down. You can get little hand tampers or you tamp it down. You want to do it in what are called lifts. You want to only compact about 3 inches at a time. So you lay down 3 inches, smooth it out, compact it down. If you need to add another lift of 3 inches, lay it out, smooth it out, compact it down until you get what you want. If you throw a whole bunch of dirt up against your house and then try to compact, say, that much worth of dirt, I don't care how much you compact it, it's not going to. And it's going to settle naturally over time and you'll have the same issue. So, if you're doing that, compact it in lifts 2 to 3 inches at a time, compact it down until you get what you want. Some people put fabric down to help make it so that water that goes through, let's say like a stone bed or something like that, is directed out. Like I said, a lot of ways to be able to do that. The other thing is this, is that wherever you're siding, and I'm going to pick on this right here. So let's say this is the bottom of your siding, and let's say you only have about 6 inches of your foundation showing. You don't want to bring that grade up where that dirt is actually touching the bottom of your siding for a couple of reasons. A, if that dirt's really high on there, it's just going to rot the bottom of your siding out. And it's going to work its way in and cause a lot of other issues. Also, the other reason is that if you have it touching your siding, generally you want a space to be able to see if bugs and whatever else, like termites or something along that line, are crawling through and making little mud trails. You need to be able to see that foundation. So you have to kind of think about that as far as setting grade also, and that can be difficult. We're at timeout. So keep that in mind as far as the grade goes. I think we talked about it.
Basic thing is get the water away from your foundation.
Right. And
With
sometimes
an extension,
And sometimes I will say this. Sometimes if you, for some reason, let's say your grade is not really, you can't really adjust it because you'd be going too high up against your siding and stuff. Sometimes what it requires is actually removing a little bit of dirt and creating what's called a gentle swale out in your yard. And that swale can be something that's about, 2 foot wide and just have a real gentle slope where that water is going to go from wherever the max grade you can get and get out there and stay out there and soak into the soil. So there's a lot of different
ways. You can make like a river, like just a rock river even. So that
you could, I've seen it where people do that and make
dig down
control it
and put the little rocks in. And
like a dry well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should ask Lori and I about that one.
It's a lot of work, but it can be pretty.
Yeah. So hopefully that answered your questions, and I'm going to turn it over to Dean now. So.
Thank you. We hope you learned something about maintaining your gutters and downspouts, and most importantly, keeping the water out of your house. That is the primary goal of those two objects. So again, getting it away from the house, whether it's with an extension or it's changing the slope, the grade, get it done. If it's too late this year, the ground isn't frozen. And extensions, you just have to slip them together. So, and we will probably still have some rain before we have much more snow. And the snow melts and goes down those gutters too. So don't forget to do what you can to keep your house and your basement dry. We'd like to remind you that once you sign off of this class, you can come right back and click on the Gingerbread Workshop Part 1 and learn how to construct your gingerbread house. We're hoping lots of you will make houses and enter our contest. We've got some great trophies to give you and probably some prizes that are being kept secret because I don't even know about them. So hopefully you'll watch and make a gingerbread house and send us some photos of it. Again, thanks for watching. We will see you next Tuesday at the same time. Thanks a bunch. Bye, guys.
Okay.